Very good. That was luck. Okay, we'd like to call to order the City Council meeting for May 15th tonight, and it is right on 6:30. It is super to see everybody here and the seats being filled. That's wonderful. And we'll get down to things pretty darn quick. If we could, from the council, we need a motion to accept the agenda. Okay, we got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The agenda is accepted. Just to give you a little bit of ground rules for tonight, we're going to leave as much time as possible for questions. The council agreed on Monday night that tonight we would allow 3 minutes for questions for whoever would like to ask questions or comments. That's a little bit different than the 5 minutes, but in the interest of time, and hopefully everybody will be concise and have your questions in mind and get up and give them to the group, and we'll go from there. We've got to have the meeting over by 8:30, so no matter what transpires, we would at least call everything off at 8 o'clock and leave 30 minutes for comments and questions. Don't think it'll take that long. Don't plan for it to take that long, but if it does, it does. But just want everybody to understand the guidelines. And just for my comment, and we're going to put everybody on the honor system just for a second, just so everybody can see, how many here would like to see improvements made in the downtown area? Just your hands up. Okay. All right. By the same token, how many people here like Main Street just the way it is and want to leave it alone? Okay. So we do have the majority is on fixing some things. There are a few otherwise. Okay. Thank y'all for that. And with that said, I guess it's time to introduce the gentleman that's the Sizemore group for most part, Bill, could you come on up to the podium? I guess you're going to go first, or Deanna first?
I'll introduce Deanna.
Okay, that'll be fine. Keeping in mind,
Podium.
one
Need to use the
thing.
microphone.
Okay, yeah, you're going to need to use the mic, Bill.
You
One
can
of the,
walk with
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about Monday night is we have hired this company to give us their impressions of what might work for our city. They are known around the Atlanta area and have helped a lot of other cities get started. We've had some other attempts that didn't get any traction and nothing's happened. The council, in the end, will be the people who make the decision as to what is going to happen and what is not going to happen. This is Sizemore Group's thinking about what would work best for a city like ours. Is that a fair statement, Bill?
Yeah, with input from a lot of your citizens, yeah.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right. So thank you for inviting us out to this charming town. And we're not developers. We're architects and town planners. So we're not just planners. We like to see things get built. And we have been doing it a long time. I mean, 50 years? I'm not that old. So I'm the second generation CEO.
Good answer.
Mike Sizemore started the firm. And we've had a long record of doing town plans and campus plans and even master planned all the Olympics when they came here, all the venues. So but we're honored to be out here. It is a very interesting town with a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges. And I want to thank everybody who joined the charrette. And it was kind of like, there's always difference of opinion, so we try and listen to everybody and then use our practical advice because we've been doing it for so long, we kind of know what'll go forward and what won't. But what's cool about towns is where your heart is usually. Either if you're on the side of we want to see it change or we want to save it, it's because you love your downtown, you know. And so it's probably why we're not developers. We want to work on something that means more than just making money. We want that means something to the citizens and a place you call home and be proud to call home. So with all that kind of teeing up, I'm going to put all the pressure on Deanna, but she is the director of our planning group and really led this effort. I was here all day at the charrette, but she's really led it on a day-to-day basis. And I'll be around for any kind of questions also. I'm not going anywhere.
All right, thanks, Bill. Mayor and Council, good evening.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having us back. I have a little PowerPoint presentation. I say little, I'll try to go through some of the slides quickly, and we can always go back to slides as needed. So I'll give that a minute. Okay. Seems to work. Okay, so our agenda for tonight on this presentation is to go over the project scope and schedule, just kind of a reiteration of what we started off with and what we were given as a scope from you all on what to look at. We'll go over the project goals, the study area. We'll talk about the stakeholder input we received. We'll talk through really briefly facts analysis and case studies that led to some of the conclusions. The program that we were given to look at, the workshop that we went through, summarize what that process was and what the outcomes were, and then we'll share the refined plan, which I know everyone has a copy of now. We'll talk through what the elements are of that, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and implementation. So the project scope are really these 5 steps. We started off back in January talking to you all. We had a meeting with you on January 19th where we heard concerns, issues, and opportunities that you saw in downtown and wanted us to build off of. We then met with our stakeholders, a group of, I believe, around 12 people appointed by you all, representative of downtown business owners, residents, DDA appointees. So really a great group of people to represent what they want to see happen in Loganville. And so we had interviews with that group on February 28th. We were here all day. And then in between that and the mini design charrette, we did a lot of site analysis. We looked through old documents of yours to really start to prepare ourselves. We then had a full day mini design charrette with that group of 12, and that was on March 29th. After that meeting, we refined the plan, and here we are presenting to you all. The next steps after this are up to 2 revisions. So we will take comments back from this. We will provide a revised plan, have you all review that, let us know if we've misunderstood anything, make sure we're giving you the right document in the end. The project schedule, as a reminder, and you just saw, really started off in January, and here we are in May, looking to provide you with final documentation once that second revised plan is complete. This was the goal that we were given from City Council at the very beginning of this process. So even, I think, before the contract was fully signed, this was what you all asked us to look at. And that's that the Loganville City Council has set the goal of establishing a plan each member can agree on to serve as a viable master plan that includes restaurants and retail in the downtown corridor, along with green space for our town green, increased parking, the relocation of the library, attractive streetscapes, as well as planning for the possible relocation of City Hall. And that's all looking at that within this study area, which is in line with the DDA or Downtown Development Authority boundaries. And you can see Main Street running through the center of that, US 20 on the right side of the screen, State Route 20 on the right side, and US 78 on the left side. So now I'll go through stakeholder input, and this was inclusive, the notes you'll see here are inclusive of the responses we originally got from City Council on what you all wanted us to look at, looking at the city survey that was provided to us, the kickoff with staff, the kickoff at the City Council meeting in January, as well as our stakeholder interviews. So we compiled all that into these goals, essentially. The first one is we asked everyone to describe downtown Loganville. And you can see some of the words we heard. Most commonly words were around similar to rundown, but also a lot of interest in the opportunities there, that Loganville is full of potential. We asked what your vision is for the future of downtown. And so highlighted here are some of the most common things we heard. Municipal center with a library, a new city hall, a town green. There was a lot of interest in a bigger town green that accommodates the events and festivals that you all host. A mix of commercial, housing, and civic uses. Really revitalization, something that's vibrant, bustling, activities, a lot of interest in activities into the evening as well. And then looking at those historic buildings, a lot of interest in preservation of the historic buildings, but making sure that they're getting the facelift that they deserve. In terms of what people wanted to see preserved, the historic buildings, as I mentioned, were discussed. The small town feel was really important, as well as just the synergy that's happening in downtown with the events and festivals that happen there. Green space was a really key component that we heard about throughout the process as well. And then in terms of what you all would like to see changed, what we heard was more to do in downtown, more of that vibrancy, new businesses, and traffic came up quite a bit. Less traffic, ways to reroute that state route that goes right through downtown. And then in terms of creating, of what you would like to see created in downtown, there was the municipal complex, library, city hall, park. And again, a lot of this is being reiterated, as you're seeing. We heard a lot of the same things. Places to eat, shop, sit, enjoy, an atmosphere for the entire family, walkability. And then some of the issues we heard specific to land use was no high-density housing. We heard that loud and clear. There was concern over rental properties, wanting to see green space expanded, focus on commercial growth. And then in terms of transportation issues, as I mentioned, the rerouting of the state route, looking at ways to take back Main Street, the traffic on Main Street, and then connectivity through sidewalks and paths and trails. We took all of that and aligned that also with what we identified in our facts and analysis stage. So we looked at previous studies that you all provided for us, and those are listed here. And we also looked at analysis. We did topography maps, we did watershed maps, we looked at zoning, we looked at future land use, and we also did sun and wind diagrams to understand how to capture the best light in downtown for Main Street, as well as if there's an amphitheater, looking at the appropriate positioning of that as well. Through our stakeholder input and our meeting with you all in January, we compiled a list of case studies of places that people really like and like going to. Madison, Monroe, Grayson, and Covington were definitely the top examples we heard, but we looked at all of those on this list. And you can see those examples here, Madison on the left, Grayson on the upper right, and Monroe on the bottom right. All historic downtowns, they all have a green space, so a lot to learn from those communities. This is the program that we were given. So this was from the council questionnaire that we provided. And then a lot of this was reiterated, as you'll see from as you just saw from our community input. But it included restaurants, retail, green space for enhanced town green, increased parking, relocation of the library, attractive streetscapes, possible relocation of City Hall, lofts over retail, detached housing, row houses if they blend into the small town feel, exploring minimum and maximum of housing needed to support the restaurants and retail, where to start, which city-owned properties, what can infrastructure support, how to attract businesses, best locations for the library, town green redesign, increased parking, and form-based code versus overlay districts. And noted at the bottom there are no standalone apartment complexes. So now I'll step through the workshop. As I mentioned, we spent an entire day with a group of really great stakeholders looking at this site. It really came down to two sites that have the most potential, that being the Main Street site, where it's the 3+ acres of property that the city currently owns, and then the City Hall site, where we are today. So those are really the two large sites in control by the city and have a lot of opportunity there. So this was our first sketch that we did that day. We had 2 design sessions throughout the day. And what we explored here was looking at green space. Again, a lot of interest in green space, a lot of interest in connecting green spaces. A city with parks, a downtown full of parks was kind of the idea leading to this. And so you can see highlighted the cemeteries in the upper left of that image and the existing town green in the center. So we looked at a new town green in this image, keeping the existing town green as well, connecting all those green spaces. The civic core being on State Route 20, and that being City Hall, library, facilities on that property, and then the back side of that being commercial with potentially some housing above that. Also during that session, we had 2 tables going, so that was one table. The second table looked at this solution, and it was, again, a new town green on Main Street with the civic core really being down on State Route 20. So there was a lot of consensus pretty quickly that an interest in that town green being away from State Route 20, there being an amphitheater there where you could have events, with a civic core being at that gateway to the community. So I think that was one of the big things that came out of our discussions. Our second session, we dove in a little deeper, and one table looked at the Main Street area, and one table looked at the civic core. And so you can see here, it's just zooming in a little bit more. We have a new town green across from the existing town green, a little bit bigger, getting closer to the size of Marietta Square. Infill commercial along Main Street and really starting to create a presence around the town green. We looked at, in this scheme, we were testing ideas throughout the day, so just testing ideas here, but we did look at the library as opposed to commercial space on the park. And then we created some more green space. You can see water retention on the bottom of the map, as well as utilizing the water tower as more of a park space. You can see pros and cons on the left side of that. One of the cons that came out of this was the library in downtown. We also talked about the green space. Maybe it needs to go on the other side of that 3-acre site to better connect both sides of downtown. Some more schemes that came out of that second session, we're testing out ideas of how to infill housing on the rest of the site if the city hall and library become a combined facility. And then also what that looks like if there's senior housing on that site. And a lot of this was number games, just to see what does that mean for the viability of that property and selling it. And we're happy to give you all those numbers too if you want to consider them. But ultimately, a lot of the discussions on these schemes were pull back on the density. That's too much density in the housing. And that keeping the library and city hall on this site as a gateway were really important to the stakeholders we worked with. So with that, I will jump into our refined plans. I know you all have taken a look at this already. You'll see that follows a lot of the logic that we walked away from that workshop with. On the right side, along State Route 20, we have a City Hall complex. That's a City Hall and library combined building. If you're familiar with Lilburn's Library City Hall, it would be something similar to that. That could be broken down into 2 buildings if needed in terms of phasing. But behind that, we looked at how could you utilize the rest of that property to help finance new development in terms of a city hall, library, or even that green space. And so we have along State Route 20, we have some commercial space that blocks the parking from the state route visually and allows for that parking to be shared with the civic components and the retail components. We looked at a variety of different housing types. So we have shown here what we're calling missing middle housing, which is essentially quads. So there's 4 units on each floor, maybe 2 stories. So you get 8 units in each floor on item C. And actually, I'm going to zoom in on the next screen here. Zooming in a little bit more, you can see the quads in item C. D is cottage homes, so they're just smaller homes on smaller lots. All detached. E is some townhome products, and then E1 is what we're calling accessory dwelling units, and those are units that would be maybe above a garage. So you would have an apartment above a garage. What we're trying to do is provide different housing options for a variety of people wanting to come and live in Loganville. We talked about how the college student goes off and how do they live here? How can they afford to live in downtown? And an accessory dwelling unit is a great opportunity for someone younger, just getting into the workforce, to be able to afford housing. Some of those examples of these housing types, this is that missing middle typology. Typically, it looks like a house, and it has 4 units on each floor. So they're smaller units, but it's a nice size that fits more into a small town feel than something like a larger multi-story complex. This is the cottages. Like I said, smaller housing types on smaller lots, usually a little closer together, but they usually can have a lot of charm. And then the accessory dwelling units, like I said, typically we see these as units above a garage. Zooming into the Main Street side, you can see here, and what differed from our workshop is we did switch the location of the park. And actually, I'll go back to the overall view. That downtown park, what this was able to do by having it more in the center of downtown, really started to better connect that civic core down to the historic buildings. So it really started to create a more comprehensive, cohesive Main Street. We then were able to infill around the park with different building typologies. There was a lot of interest in rooftop restaurants, so we're showing that with retail on the bottom and rooftop restaurants. So these are one story with just a rooftop on them. I'll zoom into this one again. Oop. So you can see surrounding that park, you have more of that infill, really focused on rooftops, so that there's great views and opportunities to oversee the park when there's events going on. Over in G, just to the left of all of that, we have infill retail. There's some retail in that area now, which could remain, so this could be a later phase to start to infill those properties. That's an opportunity there where you might be able to do a story or two with some housing above it, if you wanted to do that. Next to that, we're showing more cottages to start to infill some of that residential back into downtown. We are keeping the existing green space. We think it's a great site for a new restaurant, even the historic home behind it, if it turned into an Airbnb, or not an Airbnb, into a bed and breakfast, would be a really great opportunity to take advantage of that green space. We are incorporating restrooms onto all the green spaces. We knew that was really important, as well as what we're calling small vendor pop-ups, and I'll show you those in a second, but those are similar to what Auburn, Georgia has done, where they have brought small vendors, small shops in that can be pop-ups during festivals or heavy traffic days. And I will note, on all these plans, we kept surface parking. Building a deck can be very expensive. It's going to take a lot of coordination with private development to fund that. So we're able to do all of this with surface parking. You can see all these maps have the numbers. We took a lot of time to make sure what we were building was realistic. It was able to be parked, and it was realistic in terms of development style and type. I think this may have died. Can you click the next slide, please? So some examples of rooftops above retail. Upper left is actually in Covington. The lower left is in Smyrna. The others are more conceptual design in terms of that 1 to 2 story building, with the second story really just being the rooftop components. This is the small vendor buildings that I mentioned in Auburn. One of the stakeholders actually brought this to our attention and thought it was a really good opportunity to not have to invest in new building structure right away, but having these smaller pop-up or even temporary shelters for new businesses to get their feet wet. The water retention park that we were showing in the bottom of the screen there, the opportunity here for this to become more of a park and an amenity of the community was something we wanted to showcase, and so you can see some examples of that here. And I will end with a discussion on next steps. A lot to continue and follow up on. This is really just the first step in a larger process for you all to figure out how you want to approach downtown. We do feel that one of the first things that needs to continue working on is the rerouting of the state route. That has caused a lot of traffic, a lot of truck traffic, making it less pedestrian friendly, and takes away some of that opportunity in downtown to really become that true pedestrian friendly Main Street. So we do encourage you to continue those efforts. In terms of townhomes or any smaller housing typologies, we'd recommend going ahead, and if you do want to go in that direction, setting specifications and design standards for what you want to see, because that can mean a lot of different things. So making sure the city is comfortable with what that means in terms of density, in terms of styles, in terms of allowing for the right kind of parking and parking counts. A lot of items under detailed downtown master plans, because there's a lot of different initiatives. This could be part of one next step in a master plan, or this could be identified and addressed separately. But we do think that the place to start is at that 3+ acre site in the center of downtown, starting with the town green, and working with private development to build on that town green. That's really potentially the core of revitalization in downtown, and has a lot of opportunity because you all have control over it. So it's a really great place to start. That links to that bottom item would be, once you're ready, putting out a request for proposals to developers, so that it's a partnership between the city and the development community. Under detailed master plans, we have assessing the value of the existing city hall site and how to fund a new library and/or city hall. We know that's a hot ticket item with the new library coming in, that the city's committed to some funding for that. So looking at how can you take advantage of the assets you already have to pay for that, and figure out if and when a city hall fits into that equation. Quantifying infrastructure needs for proposed development. We know that there are some concerns about infrastructure. We couldn't dig into that too deeply in this process, but obviously that is the next step as you start to partner with development groups. Programming space needs for the park, the library, and the city hall. As you move in that direction, really understanding what it is that the community desires for those spaces, so that you can make sure that you're incorporating that into that process. Streetscape plans, especially right now with Main Street being a state route, looking at how you can enhance working with Georgia Department of Transportation, but specifically around that central park space, making sure that the landscaping is really pedestrian friendly and really fits the needs of that green space and is really attracting people there. Programming of the historic green spaces. As you saw in one of the first diagrams, that connection to all the green spaces, there's a lot of opportunity there. Considering how to program to attract people there and really create that as an opportunity and an event space. Arts and historic programming, we heard a lot about the historic context of Loganville, the interest to keep the history alive. So linking that with even the cemetery programming, the opportunities to really showcase Loganville and its history. And I mentioned arts there because arts can really start bringing that out, whether it's art on a trail, sculpture, murals, really different ways to showcase the history. And then last we have on here is the pathway connectivity of the parks, which I already mentioned. And with that, I thank you for listening to our presentation, and we are here for questions.
I just had a couple.
Okay.
I'm really appreciative that it's obvious that you're looking at developing some kind of future plan without leaving our current property owners downtown. We want to include them and make sure they're a part of it. What has other cities done to try to help those people who are the merchants today, or the property owners today at the very least, to make them come into the plan and help them with new fronts to their buildings and those kinds of things? I mean, we're doing a budget meeting very soon. What has other cities done to get them involved?
I mean, I'd say one of the most common things are facade grants. So if the city can work with either the DCA, the Development of Community Affairs, or have their own general funds that go towards facade upkeep and maintenance and enhancement, that's one we've seen in a lot of communities.
Want me to add?
Yeah,
So
you
a
got
lot
it.
of times when we've added a town green and the city side, it's the programming. Having a green space is one thing, but making sure you have constant festivals and stuff, that'll draw more people downtown. And that'll draw more value to that real estate and make it easier to, I see a lot of private dollars follow the investment the city makes. And so, but it's more than just the physical space, it's the programming of the public space, so that you're helping draw traffic to all the businesses that are down there.
Just in your opinion, what would it cost a property owner with a storefront downtown to redo the front of the building? 50,000, 20,000, 100,000? I have no
Depends on
clue.
there's some, when I drove down there, well, some of those are kind of charming, and then some of those like, oh my God, we gotta do something about that. So I was just driving here thinking that. But I have my own storefront. We're in a 100-year, the building that Deanna and I are part owners with another partner, is it was built in 1915. And we finally got around to redoing the storefront. And the Historical Society came in and made us redo this really special glass. And just doing that transom glass that they don't build anymore, so I had to hire somebody to find all the pieces, like 25 grand. But it made a big difference, and we painted it for 8 grand. And it really, it's just a little storefront like most of those, but it's right downtown Atlanta. It's a 4-story building, but we kind of own the bottom 2 floors on the street. So, anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 is a ballpark. And you have some that could probably be fixed up for less and some that'll take a little more. And there's grants, like she was saying, that may help with that.
Right.
But increasing the value of the property is really the way to do that.
Okay, another question that, and I just don't know the answer to this one, Bill. What has other cities done when you get in the situation we're in now? And I know we're forever going to have the Methodist and the Baptist Church downtown. That's where they need to be. That's where they want to be. That's where they're going to be, in my opinion, unless they make decisions. But how does a city go about helping churches who've got these storefronts downtown into other locations, because they're really not going to help retail? They're just not.
Yeah,
We have
there's
3 of them.
You got the old churches that are down here that are actual
Beautiful.
church structures, and then you got kind of tenant fit out churches that are in there. And as when we first started master planning Alpharetta, different demographics and stuff, but there are a couple churches right downtown, but the rents actually started going up. There was value in just the plan we created. We haven't even finished the plan, and the rents were starting to go up. Not that if you're a tenant, that's a problem, right? If you're a landowner, that's a good thing, right? So you got to balance that. But that actually moved some of the lower performing people went to more economical areas just out of the pure economics of it. And so if it's low rent right now because it's an old building, it's hard to do much about it. But you want to help. You want to do what you can to help them, right?
Right.
Because they're. I wonder, we did one, well, there was a church in downtown Duluth, and we did downtown Duluth. And that church also became a theater. So finding other uses for that space when they're not doing it, which then helped the restaurants. And so, it basically being inventive. So if you're just using the church on Sunday morning and Wednesday night, what else can you do at that space? And partner with them. And that was a partner. The city guaranteed a certain amount of seats would be sold to that theater. It was the Aurora Theater, so it was a partnership to get that going. But it really maximized the use of that space, and they were in not a church space; they were in just a shell space.
That brings people downtown, obviously.
Yeah, still a theater today. I think the church has moved out.
Good idea. I like that.
Let me dive into, I don't know if this will be for Deanna or Bill. You're looking at this, and we're looking at a combined City Hall library. And I want to, first of all, I don't think that that's going to work, because the library obviously has a timeline. They've got a grant from the state that they have to get working on. There's no reason this City Hall needs to leave this building. So can we look at dividing these 2 buildings out and saving room for a future City Hall, but putting the library there? And then eventually you would connect the 2 buildings with some sort of atrium or some sort of water feature outside of, a mezzanine or whatever you want to call it. But definitely these 2 need to be separated, and there's several reasons why. One, City Hall, we don't need a City Hall right now, so we don't need to start building the City Hall. The library has a grant. They're going to start moving forward. They need their land given to them so they can start that. The other thing is that the city voted to give $1.5 million a piece of land and not a penny more. And I have a strong feeling that if you build a commingled building, the taxpayers are going to end up paying more for that library than they were promised they would pay. And I don't want that to happen. So if you keep the 2 buildings separate, the library is responsible for the library, and the city's responsible for the city. So if we were to divide these 2 out, does this plan stay the same, and you just move these 2 buildings a little bit further apart, leaving room for a future town City Hall, but they could be connected in the future?
No, that's incremental development. That's a perfectly fine way to do it. I think the main reason we looked at closing, it'll cost you more that way because it's just there's efficiencies. Like if you're doing 2 sets of restrooms, now if you do the atrium in the middle, that helps. But you're sharing, it's a small building. Both of them are at relatively small buildings. And so there's inefficiencies when you build those 2 small buildings. There's more exterior walls. So it was just a practical
Right,
move on
but
our
the
side.
library's definitely going to be moving forward.
Yeah.
City Hall may not move forward for 10 years. Library may move
Yeah.
forward this year.
And we actually dealt with the same thing. We're doing a brand-new city hall for Brookhaven right now. And they wanted to move the library into it, and the timing didn't work out. The city hall was actually funded, and the library wasn't funded yet. And so we just pushed away from the library and built the city hall. In your case, it may be the reverse, right?
Right, and I'm
Because you got to
actually-
follow the funding. You have to follow
Right.
the funding of these
And
things.
library apparently has theirs and city
But,
doesn't.
the taxpayers in Brookhaven aren't paying a penny for their city hall because they did a special use district for all the commercial property that generated a $200 million bond, and so everything's being funded by the commercial property.
But I was also looking that you've got that combined building as being 24,000 square feet, and the library's committed to building a 15,000 square foot library, which leaves 9,000 square feet for a city hall. So this building that you propose is already too small, if it were going to be a combined building.
Yeah, we've also been looking at the cost of construction, so we knew the size of the library you were looking at, and we also know what that's trending. We did the master plan for the entire Gwinnett library system, so we know what the costs are trending right now for that size building. So in every project, you get into this scope, quality, and budget. We want, and I usually tell a client, pick 2. If the budget's set and the scope is set to 15, then your quality may suffer. So you got to balance those. But that's some of the steps we're talking about in programming. And I think that would probably be the time to look at what you're talking about when you program what you really need for a city hall. It's not just what the citizens want, it's inside out what you need to operate a city hall and what you need to operate a library. And then you look at those two, the programs will be separate. There'll be some overlap. You'll have community rooms that could be used by both, but it's perfectly fine to do them incrementally like you're recommending.
And then let's look at the, where you're putting the town green here. So originally in your first plan, you had it flipped. And I understand why you put it here. I think you said it had something to do with acoustics and the sun setting and things like that, and bringing this closer to town. But if you put retail, if you flip these like you've done here, one of our things that we said is we wanted to save those historic big trees on Main Street. And if you do it the way you do it, you're going to bulldoze all those trees. But if you put it the other way, those trees become an integral part of a town green. So people come into a concert, might have some heat sensitivity issues or want to sit under trees. They've got some nice trees to sit under. I'd like to look at flipping that back so we can save those trees.
Yeah, we looked at it both ways. And really, when I was walking the site, a lot of times what you do is you take the best site and you give it to the public. And that was sitting up on a hill, is flat, a lot of shade in those. There's a lot of big trees in what we left. And then we were looking at how you would wrap around and you can activate that site, thinking, I think at the time, one of the scenarios was a new library on the green as well. And, libraries attract a lot of traffic. It's the best thing you're doing for your downtown is to move the library close, because it'll drive. Usually what you need from retail is for something to be there, right? And so retail survives on anchors. A Publix drives a lot of traffic. You can double that in the side stores. But a city hall, this is a good night though. You had a lot of people here. But a library, it has almost as much traffic as a grocery store. So that was a really good move. So we were trying to use the library as a catalyst for your downtown. A 15,000 square foot grocery store.
I have some questions for Paul Rosenthal as it pertains to looking at some of this.
Sure.
Because, Skip, you said at the meeting when we met with them, no apartments. City Council pretty much said no apartments. The CAG study said no apartments. Our stakeholders pretty well said no apartments. Our citizens have said no apartments. And then we're sitting here tonight and we're looking at apartments. So I understand we're going to have to compromise to get some things we want. But my questions, Paul, is all of this falls within our downtown overlay district. can't, because I know that you talked about the taking of property or things like that, but we're talking about, this is property the city owns, that the taxpayers have paid for. Everybody in this room paid for this property, and they don't want apartments, but if we're going to have apartments, so to speak, to fund these other wonderful things here, being that this is the downtown overlay district, can the city restrict this and make absolutely none of this rental? Everything that they build would have to be owned and occupied, owner-occupied?
So you started off with a really fun question there, Ms. Long. And generally, the advice is going to be, and I know Ms. Webb and I had many conversations on this in the past, this is a hot topic right now in the cities and in the state of Georgia.
Please make sure, because the people have told me that they have a hard time hearing you.
I haven't checked in the last few weeks, but I certainly can. There's a couple of cases currently on appeal about the issue of rental restrictions. I mean, the general advice is going to be is y'all can't get into the business of legislating how the occupancy or how the fee is split, right? So renting an apartment is no different than owning a home. While it's very different to your stakeholders, it's just a different way of splitting ownership and occupancy, if you will. No different than commercial. Some people own their business building, some people rent. Same thing for where they reside. So legislative decisions that y'all are making about how you decide to build out this public space, that rests with this body sitting here before me, what y'all's legislative policy decisions are. So again, this is a concept master plan that Sizemore has drawn for you because it's what they do every day. I'm not going to get into the policy reasons why, but I know what they'll tell you is that when you try and revitalize and create a vibrant downtown, you look for multiple housing options to be infilled around your public spaces, multiple housing options to be infilled around your retail use and around your commercial or O&I uses, so that you have the walkability that you hear your stakeholders and your citizens talking about wanting to have. All that being said, the long answer, or the short answer to my long explanation is, I'm never going to advise you guys to try and restrict occupancy to owner-occupied only. Within the private sector, you see HOAs doing those types of things. If this concept or some derivation of it is something that you decide to proceed forward with, it most certainly would probably be something that you put out in an RFQ or an RFP looking for public-private partnership with a developer, right? So you can look for developers to come to the table and say, this is how we think it should be done, this is what we think it should be done. And we probably have to have a much more detailed attorney-client conversation about how we structure that, probably through your development authority. That's not for tonight, that's a far down the road path. But in an RFQ or an RFP process, with developers through an appropriate development authority channel, some of those ideas can be explored, and they can present some ideas and options on how there might be some ownership mix restrictions. Because an HOA privately can have some restrictions on ownership, occupancy, rental types. But legislating that from this days in a zoning action, I just can't recommend it. Now, we may see the Georgia Court of Appeals rule some decisions on some things that are happening on the northwest corner of Atlanta over the next few months, and I can give you a different opinion. But I do know right now there's a couple of city cases up on Court of Appeals that are testing that very issue of legislating or prohibiting or restricting rental unit only type developments.
Okay, well then let me ask you this, not along those same lines, but similarly, being that this is a downtown overlay district where we can do things differently than we do in our regular zoning, would that also apply to limiting this to only 55 and older rentals? And the reason why is because the 55 and older community is very undervalued in this community. There's very few opportunities for a 55 and older to find a place to live in this community. I know there's long waiting lists to get into our 55 and older communities. There's going to be less traffic because we're talking about bringing traffic into town if you're putting living space here. So you would have less traffic. The lifestyles of the 55 and older community, their lifestyle aligns with our curfew restrictions downtown. They are the demographic with the most disposable income. They are the ones that actually would be able to support your restaurants, your bars, and your things like that. They would make those business successful. They enjoy dining, they enjoy cocktail hour, they enjoy community events. They would not, a 55 and older community would not put a strain on our school system. It would also, 55 and older communities are more family oriented. When your grandkids come to visit Mama and Papa, they're going to take them to one of our wonderful parks and go to one of our wonderful ice cream shops and sandwich shops. Is there any way that our downtown overlay district could, if we can't limit it to no rentals, can you require those rentals to this to be a 55 and older community?
So 55 and older restrictions are a very unique set of the law, where normally we hear that the way we restrict zoning cannot be based upon types of protected classes. Yet 55 plus age sanctions have been upheld. Again, I would caution you to say that that sort of concept, or does that happen, is probably a very premature focal point consideration in what you're dealing with here, because this is very much a master plan big picture. But the same answer applies. Can you? That might be something that in an appropriate private-public partnership agreement with the developer, that they requested a rezone of this, or they requested certain conditions. They say, we're going to build these cottages, or we're going to build these apartment units that's C and D or E, and we're going to make them age restricted. So age restricted, or what we call 55 plus communities, they have withstood a constitutional scrutiny, and they can be placed in certain areas. I would never encourage you to carte blanche say all new zoning or all parcels on this project are 55 plus. But if there was sort of a rational basis for why we're going to take certain components of this project and say this is going to be an age restricted portion of the project, I think that could be appropriate with the right planning.
Okay, thank you. I just also want to remind everyone that we did a Haddow report back during the Conley days, and I pulled that up and read it again. And Haddow said, they described the pipeline of apartments in the surrounding area as daunting, and that this was without them being given full and accurate numbers on the number of permits that we already had out at the time, and that there are still close to 1,000 permits and units coming out of the ground. And that's not to mention all the other apartments and rentals, houses and subdivisions that have been built since 2020 when the Haddow report was written. Haddow also touted a lack of job concentration, which would raise the question about a need for more apartments. And their number one conclusion in their study was that downtown Loganville is not a natural location for apartment developments. And they said that we should focus on our retail on Main Street over apartments. And so saying that, and I know that, again, this is just a first step, but you can't move forward if you don't know where you're going. And I see where we're going, and so let's try to drive the train to a better location. So if we're going to do something like this, it's obviously going to come in phases. And obviously the library is the one with a deadline. Matter of fact, probably this whole thing is because the library needs a place to go, and we might as well look at everything. So you've got the library first, and this is going to come in phases. We obviously don't need a city hall building. We don't need more apartments. We could use some retail and some park space, a new town green. So what I would like to propose is, if this is something that this council is going to work on moving forward, that we require that the citizens that have lived here for decades and paid thousands and thousands of tax dollars, that they're the ones that benefit first. And I would like to see every park and every green space built, every other thing done to benefit the people that have lived here forever, that they should be benefited before we start bussing in new people. And I believe that the apartments should be the last thing that we think about.
In my opinion, this is the kind of discussion when we've tried to do things in the past that stymied everything. These discussions will come when there's time to come. We've got to deal with whoever is going to be involved with us to build stuff. And what can we build? We've got two things that we've heard for years and years, and now they're sort of meeting together. One of them has been, and we want, if we do this, we want the retailers who come in here and the restaurant owners to be successful. Well, you've got to have people to use the facility. So that's one thing that's been up for years and years. If everybody were to be asking this room, do you want apartments, we'd probably all say no. Our envision of apartment dweller has changed over the years. It's quite different than what it used to be. But with that said,
Can we go back to the photo that you had of the middle, what
The
is it?
missing
The
middle.
missing
Yeah,
middle?
can I talk about the apartments we actually proposed?
Yes.
48. You had 900 that were proposed before we, there's 48, and they're in missing middle buildings. Well, and you got really good advice from, I don't know if you're the legal counsel, but everything you said is true. But but the 48 are done in little buildings that could look like antebellum homes. And they're done in a way, there's an FHA loan that allows a person to get a residential financing on that 12-unit building if they live in one of the units. So then they have home ownership. They got 30-year financing, which you can't do otherwise. They're policing the people in there because they live there. And it's incremental. It's not a big, in fact, you're not going to get a big developer. A developer that's coming in here is going to want 150, 200 to 350 units, or it's just not worth the brain damage they'll have to go through. So, and also it's not worth I want to build a pool. Well, you got to have so many apartments to afford the pool, and I want to have a full-time property manager so it looks nice. That's your 200 to 350 unit apartment deal. Most of the towns we've done, not all of them, the apartment is a catalyst for the retail. I have to say this all the time because everywhere I go, nobody wants apartments, they all want the retail. I'm just, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear, I'm just here to tell you what it is. So, but we have tailored, and that's why I said I like this project, because it's not about making money. Because if you wanted to pay off, say, $7 million for that piece of property, divide that by 20,000, and that's how many apartments you need to do. Well, nobody wants that many apartments. But you're not going to be able to pay, you're not going to be able to generate the kind of funds with the lower density development, because the funds are really related to how many units and the price point of the units. And so I think it's a great discussion. I'm in this discussion with multiple mayors around the region. There is a housing crisis, so you have banks lending money. You have these developers trying to build apartments everywhere because they know they can fill them up. David Halley, I respect, and he's probably right. You don't need 900. But what we're proposing, the plan, so you're absolutely clear, is 48, and they're 12-unit buildings. So there's like, what, that's
8-unit buildings.
8-unit buildings. Oh, not even, wow. See, I would have maxed them out at 12. But anyways, so it's only 8 units. Probably couldn't park more than that. So and they really could be charming because this is actually an architect in California that started this missing middle, and he would go into every city he went to. They said no apartments, and then he took them to some of the beautiful sections of San Bernardino. They said, well, I like that building, and then he went back and said those were all apartments that you like, but they're little 2-3-story buildings that were charming, had little courtyards, and so that's the kind of thing we're recommending, and I think it could help. Local. What I like about the missing middle, it's not some out-of-town financer that's not going to care about it or flip it. It's usually somebody that's in town and wants to step up and become an owner and become a civic citizen by owning that little building.
And I like that, and I mean, I really actually like your plan. I just would like to see that maybe relegated to 55 and older.
Yeah, there is an apartment
So
deal. Like
these are-
one's 55 and over, one's free market, and then our favorite English pub is coming back in the middle, right on Powers Ferry. And you're right, so.
And these are all things that we can, as we have the property, we can control as far as doing the design standards and putting them out there to bid, correct?
Yeah.
And then, so, it's been a few years since I read the Hadow. I think what they recommended was somewhere a maximum in the range of 200 to 300. 200 is where what I recall. But one of the things that we focused on is what was that minimum maximum that we think is sustainable for this area, and you're coming up with what'd you say, 48?
Yeah.
So how does that fit into developing our city?
David gave you the standard market answer that I just told you, that
Yeah.
number, right? And that's what you need to attract. And you don't need more than that. You don't need 500 apartments. But what we did, we went a step further and listened to the citizens and listened to the stakeholders. And I said, can we put more residential here that's single family? We also added ADUs, which somebody was asking what an ADU is. That sounds like a funny term, right? It's a granny flat. I don't know if you remember that, but a lot of times you used to build a house in your garage in the back and you had an apartment above the garage. A lot of developments are being done like that to build in more housing because there's a housing shortage and you want more people downtown. But a lot of times they end up being the man cave or something else, right? They're built for that, but the teenager lives out there or something. But it's allowing that makes a big difference. And again, it's not an out-of-town investor. You're combining home ownership with the potential for rental. And it helps some people afford it. They did that in Decatur, and you had people that couldn't pay taxes that were there forever because the taxes went up. But once they got an ADU and they could rent it out, they could stay. So.
I do have a question about the existing buildings on Main Street right now. In y'all's experience with partnering with the Joint Cities Foundations and their Main Street program, be a good fit for our downtown? And would that be the best to go for the facade program versus doing it out of our general fund?
Yeah, I mean, the Main Street program has a lot of grant opportunities. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they also would do small sketches, right? They would help you
We
kind
have
of come
one.
up with development plans. It's a great service. I think you have to dedicate someone to it, so it is some city investment in that sense, but it's a great program to pursue, absolutely.
Now, because I know initially when we started off, y'all also gave us a bid because we had a hard time finding a downtown coordinator. So if that's something do they actually have to be on our staff, or is that something that we would delegate, kind of let y'all can handle the
Yeah, I
paperwork?
think you
or
can
something?
consult that. We would have to double check that, but I think I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that, but
I
it's
know
a
we
good
have
question.
8 people doing 8 different, 8 of those, or one person doing 8 jobs here already. So I want to ask even more of our staff and give them
Yeah.
as another thing that they have to do.
I just want to add, that's a really good point. Sometimes it's like I hire, we're a smaller firm, 22 people. So I hire like a fractional CFO. I can't afford a full-time CFO, right?
Yeah.
So instead of paying for a full-time, Main Street person, a firm like ours or other firms could provide somebody part-time that could do the same job, and that's probably all you really need.
And we don't have to pay y'all benefits either, so.
That's right.
Bill, are other cities talking about the fact that, last year in the 20-county Atlanta area, pricing of homes went up 52%. Went up from 230,000 median to 350. Our kids can't buy a house
Yeah.
today, don't have the down payment, couldn't make the payments if they had it. Does these apartments play into that at all? Or you would think they would.
It's a huge problem. I mean, and personally, my son lives in Boston. He bought a house in Vermont, unseen $500,000 because they were going like that. So it's a real problem. That's part of the housing crisis. And to tell you the truth, new apartments don't help it because new apartments rent for $2,500.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a big problem. And, some of the tiny houses, so don't get too restrictive about the size of the house. Some of the tiny houses are the ADUs, let them get here. And I like to say, if you can get a young family here, the 55 are important because they do have the money. That was a good point. They'll go out to eat more often, go to a little nicer restaurant at times. But it's those young families when they're getting started. I mean, I was in an apartment the first couple of years of my marriage. And then we ended up moving back, to the area that we had that apartment. But they get to know an area, and they're your future, families, basically. But they need something just like all of us when we first got out of,
We would
college.
like for some of our kids to be able to stay here.
Yeah.
Ian, can you explain about the square foot, how it was important to make it smaller versus doing a 2,000 square foot apartment or wherever you want to call them, townhomes? Can you explain why it is 900 square feet?
Well, what's driving that 350,000 besides what the market could demand? It's labor shortages, but usually all building construction a lot of times boils down to cost per square foot. So if you have a 1,800 square foot house, will cost generally, it's not exactly analytical, twice what a 900 square foot house. So look at what those 3,500, they're probably, I don't know, 2,000 square feet for 350,000. So if you want to get down to that 200, there's a development in Ball Ground you ought to go see, right next to a church. I don't know if the church did it. But they didn't require garages, which is the biggest thing that blows the budget. They didn't require garages, and they built a little neighborhood where you could all park in a little gravel parking lot and then walk to your house. And you had no street in front of your house except for kids to play. You didn't have to even worry about a car getting in them. But those sold, like anywhere from 120 to 160. But that was before this rush. I bet you they're going for 200 now. But you have to get really creative for that to make it affordable.
In today's world, in Loganville, you can't find anything under 250,
Yeah.
and very few of those.
I mean, good thing that pay is going up. I mean, that helps. I mean, part of it's on,
But so is interest rates.
so is everything, so the cost of everything.
Well, to Melanie's point too, we're talking about going back to the library, city hall. I mean, yeah, the library's on its charted path right now, but I'm sure this 24,000 square feet that you're showing, how much of that can the city, or maybe for Danny, what do you need for the city hall? Any idea?
That will come with the design. I mean, if you design a city hall versus being in school, you can condense it some, but
Right.
that would be something that architect would have to tell us.
Yeah, that's usually a 3 to 6 month programming process. So that's why one of the steps was programming. We had one day to come up with an estimated
Sure.
size. So usually it's sitting down with the department heads and finding out what they need, how big, what's your population growth. And it takes some time to tell you. So this is an estimated guess on some of that stuff.
How many employees do you have in here?
Probably, 35, 40, Christie, you'd say? In this building? Yeah.
And, we wished every day that the old city hall had been built where we could have added a second floor to it. But that was not the case, and we're paying the price today.
I think that was part of our thinking, because a one-story city hall and a one-story library may be the most economical, but it wastes some beautiful land. And one-story building, I did a one-story city hall, I'm not very proud of it. It's nice, but it was for Stone Mountain, so it's not far from here. But just architecturally, when you can get up 2 floors, it looks better.
Well, if you don't build it for that second floor, you can't add it, right?
I know.
I mean,
You wanna
it
build
costs
that-
more to build it that way.
Yeah, sometimes you shell it too. You just build the shell up there.
Yeah. Sugar Hills City Hall, it has some building, offices downstairs and open atrium, but then all the administrative and city council's all on the second floor upstairs. Maybe that's what you're thinking. You could put it all upstairs and.
Yeah, and in a small town, you got to leverage too, because there's a library city hall combination in Schaumburg, Illinois. They combined it with the theater. So how can you maximize all the space you got so you can use it for more than one thing? Just like everybody has to wear 8 hats, your buildings have to wear 5 hats.
I got one question about parking. I know this is very conceptual and all that, but I know, for example, a lot of the parking isn't near the current downtown area, which that might be good enough for now for those businesses, but when we get some of those empty ones filled up and stuff, I guess people would have to park all the way down on Lucy Street and then walk down that way. Is that by design? So they walk past more, or?
I mean, you really want to create a park once environment. So the streetscape's really important. So if you're walking in shade and there's trees and flowers along the way, it's not that bad. But the surface parking was important to us just from an economic standpoint. I think once you go
Definitely.
structured parking, your rent numbers are out of the area.
Because right now, when we have events, that whole 4 acres is covered in cars.
With cars? Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, so once we, put the town green and this other stuff here, that takes away a lot of our parking. I know we're regaining some out of it too, but we will be losing a lot of that. And that just worries me a little bit about
I
the
actually
parking,
think that
especially
should be a
for our
separate study.
events.
I'm not trying to make money off it, but we had to do that
in Duluth, they had the same, we put the town green in Duluth right where the parking lot was. And there was people that convinced it wouldn't work. So we actually counted all the spaces we were taking down. I'm sorry, yeah, we counted all the spaces that were going to be lost because of the town green. And then we did a detailed layout and had much on-street parking and parking everywhere we could, and we showed them they're actually gaining a few spaces. But it's a detailed study.
And in y'all's experience, when we commit to doing a plan, would that kind of move DOT a little further along and coming out with another kind of truck alternate route so we could gain back our Main Street? Or, like, I'm just trying to think, because we can't do on-street parking without DOT approval.
Yeah.
And we ain't gonna get that approval until DOT gives up the streets. So it's kinda
It all
like-
starts with a plan.
Yeah,
And
so-
the Alphareta's downtown master plan we did, they ended up with parking on Highway 9. So they got parking right off of Highway 9. It can be done, but what I've seen with the Department of Transportation, they have so much going on. If somebody comes in with a vision, I've noticed over the years, they'll work with you more and more, they get it. I'm just trying to give you an example of that. Well, my friend, the mayor of Brookhaven, he went to a meeting, got the 7 mayors along 285, went to a meeting with the DOT and said, you're spending $1 billion on this intersection. This is 400 and 285. But it's the same thing at a smaller scale. But he said, are you planning for transit? Or why aren't you planning for transit? And they said, because we didn't have a champion. And they said, well, we're your champion. And now they got the whole thing lined up for BRT to go from, all the way from Doraville to the Braves Stadium because they championed it. So I think your starting assumption was right. Having a plan, you have something to talk to them about, being a champion and showing them what you want to do and showing that your act is together. It's not a town that's divided. A town that's divided, sometimes the DOT won't want to get in that buzzsaw.
And I like the idea of the dog park. It's just kind of off by itself. I know that's the land that I don't like, having land that's not being used. I do like that idea over here. But yeah, I guess that would answer my question on that too, because they could park there and then you want it to be all connected. And I do see the trail now. It's harder to see on here than it is on the screen. But yeah, I can see how you could walk there. And then also to the lake feature over there as well. So overall, I think y'all did very good. Any other questions from council?
I just want to mention that Ann Hunsinger's not here. Her husband's having 5 bypass surgery in the morning, dealing with a major issue, so she sends her apologies, but she just want to let y'all know that that's why she's not here, because she's dealing with that.
Okay, are you guys good? We can go into the question
Sure.
answer session?
You guys warmed us up for sure.
Sir,
You guys warmed us up for sure.
has council got any other questions you need to answer?
I don't, but I might have a question as we hear from
Yeah,
the.
as we hear.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So,
That's fine.
Mayor.
How many mics you got, Kyle?
Yes, Kyle. So, Mayor, staff will come to the person asking the question. We just ask, since this is a public hearing, that you state your name and your address for the minutes.
In consideration of time, we are looking at 3 minutes.
And it'll be on the clock, on the TV, 3 minutes.
Okay. Who would like to be first? I think this gentleman right here in the second row had his hand up first. Yes, sir.
Don Walker, Bruce Street. If we tear down this building, which is not utilized very much, we got a lot of spaces we don't even use, are we going to be building the building that we've already paid $40,000 for blueprints for?
I think that may be part of the Conley deal. I don't know if we paid.
Is that the same building you're proposing that we've already paid $40,000 for?
I don't think we have we?
So what 40,000, the only 40,000 we paid for was for a PPI, is that what you're referring to?
The blueprints for the new city hall?
It wasn't blueprints, it was a concept plan that we didn't get to that stage.
We're still $40,000. Is that the same plan we're going to be putting in?
Don't know. Seriously, we don't know.
And since the library, I'm talking about this building, now I've got 3 minutes. since the library is mainly a homeless shelter, why can't we put it in here right now? I mean,
Well,
I'm in the library a lot.
That's a fair question. The biggest reason is because much of the funding that we're getting from the county and the state is only for new construction, and that's $4.2 million. They don't spend money for remodeling and move it somewhere.
But we've already got the room. We're going to have to put part of our money in with it too to move the library. Why not use this building that we're underutilizing now? It's a good building. It's not really pretty, but it's a good building.
Good building. It's served a lot of purposes. Yes, sir.
But how much of this building are we not using?
We got, what, 60,000 square feet total?
Probably 30% not used.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a good place to put a library. There's a bookstore downtown Monroe that is so much fun, and they got every room is for different type of books.
You take your
can't keep up with
grandkids,
it.
don't you?
Huh?
You take your grandkids.
No, it take me.
Okay. Okay, good point.
A quick question though, Danny. How much was our last air conditioner we had to replace here?
It was a couple of them. It was 29,000,
And how many have we replaced now?
6. Well,
About how
the
long
main
do they
ones
last?
are 14,000, but the ones in the classroom, every classroom has its own air conditioner, and those are, it was 29,000 for 6.
I mean, a 60-year-old building does have maintenance costs. I mean, it's reality. Yes, sir. You're on.
Hey, Marty Zero from the Ivy Creek subdivision.
Yes, sir.
This afternoon, I came down from Grayson, made a right hand onto Main Street, got as far as the Methodist Church, and stopped in a traffic line that went all the way down to Route 78. It took
Yes, sir.
4 traffic light changes before I could get through that intersection. Now, the lady said something about talking with the DOT about relocating Route 20. Is that a pie in the sky hope, or is there any possible chance? Because as long as we got this wall right through the middle of the city, it's going to be tough to do any kind of.
I don't believe it's pie in the sky, but it's expensive. We've talked about several alternatives. We've been pushed back on several, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. The closest road, I believe, if I remember when we had our discussions, was we thought we might could use Brand Road to go around Main Street, and they said that was too far out for one thing, but things change. I don't know the answer. I wish I did.
Like I say, as long as Route 20 goes right through the middle of the city, it's going to be a problem, yeah.
Yes, sir, and I don't know why back in the day, a lot of cities were built that way. Monroe's got the
Well,
same
when you had a
issue.
horse and wagon going through town.
Well, that's
Makes a
true.
difference.
That was way back in the day. I wasn't going back that far.
And DOT does have an approved concept now that takes 20 from Brand Road and brings it down and ties it into 78, showing like this roundabout here at Main Street is one of the alternates in the concept. But that's where the project is stopped. It just needs to continue on so that they can actually, finish the design and construct it. So it is there.
Of course, we could change the name of the town to Deerfield. It looked pretty good then.
Of course, it looked pretty good. We put Loganville back on it, too. Thank you. Behind you, Tim. Oh, go ahead. That's okay. You got the mic over here. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Linda Johns, 866 Leopard Road. I've been to several council meetings and have been kind of keeping up with what you're trying to do with the library. And my understanding was that the library, putting a new library in, was to draw people to town, to the middle of town. And now looks like we're moving the library from one end of the road to the other end of the road. And it's not anywhere near the middle of town where people are going to be walking with their children. And
That's viable.
That's why I just didn't understand.
Keeping
why.
in mind, this is a concept, but I'll let Bill share with you his thought processes to that, because I don't know it.
Okay.
I shouldn't tell, I agree with her.
I mean, it was a con in our presentation, and I'm looking at it and saying, really? So it maybe some more debate is necessary.
And and the council does have the opportunity with Sizemore to take a look at all this, and the things that they think need to be adjusted, they can certainly ask for that, and they've committed to one round of adjustments, right, as far as the concept. So that may be part of it, Linda, I just don't know.
It might be like an option, an alternative when you're talking to the other stakeholders, the library system and stuff like that, they can evaluate. They do have a lot of parking. It does drive traffic, and it's a lot of parking, so I know that was part of the challenge, and we had enough land to do everything we wanted, plus turn the economics around a little bit on this site.
But just for info, there's not been a commitment made as to where the library is going to go yet. This is just a concept. Okay, we got somebody over here. Yes, Terry?
Terry Parsons, Chandler Hawk Road. I was on the committee, and I did enjoy my time with Bill and Deanna, and this concept that they came up with is interesting, to say the least. I feel like, in a way, the green part, the green space you've got right in the middle of town sort of divides the town. I know you're trying to make it like a focal point, but the problem with the whole, my understanding was we were trying to revitalize Main Street economically, and taking out that chunk of space and not putting any economic development there, would be losing some walkability for commercial traffic by customers coming in. And if you swap the green space with the cottages and the retail space next to the City Hall library area, then you would have that economic strip of land used for what we've been looking for, is an attraction for business to grow down Main Street, because it sort of splits the town in half. You've got the old half down there toward at 78 with a little bit of new development, which kind of almost gives the people that have the old buildings like an old vine just dying off on the end as being ignored, when all the other activities down on the other end. And if you made the green space right next to City Hall, then that would sort of draw everybody, and there's more parking right in that area too. But that was just my 2 cents worth, the way I see the way it laid out.
I think there was, and I don't know the answer again, but I think there was some concern about having it right by Highway 20.
Yeah, there
I think
was. I mean,
Deanna
there is.
mentioned that.
We've done a lot of town centers, and having the green space to block off the real busy street sometimes help. Alpharetta, because it's so small and pinched, kind of works, and they traffic calm the heck out of that street where you can't traffic calm that street. So there was a lot of discussion about that, but he is right in that we're putting this void in the middle. But if you look at a lot of the case studies, they have that much green near their Main Street. So it was just balancing those two things. We actually looked at it both ways, and this is the plan we recommended. But I could see a version of this that has more retail there in a smaller green. A lot of times we oversize our green spaces, and if you actually put actual green spaces next to it, it's just such a beautiful piece of property, though. I mean, I was taken back when in the charrette, I walked up there because we were debating this stuff, and I walked up to that top of that hill, and I said, oh my God, we can't destroy this.
Bill or Deanna, let me ask a quick question over here, Paul Rosenthal. Do y'all have an overlay of this with a ped shed perimeter anywhere in your presentation?
We don't right now, but we could put that on it.
I just think that would be
Absolutely.
helpful. So
Yeah.
I don't do policy here, I represent y'all, but you're getting into some of my, love language, and that is the walkability of a community. And so what these fine folks will tell you is that if you want to create a really good walkable community, then you create communal space, community space. This town green they've identified is your communal green space. And you want it to be walkable. And what the research will tell you is that ped shed, that pedestrian shed, will be a 1/4 mile radius, a 1/4 mile circle, 1/2 mile in diameter circle. So if you stick it in the middle, you're going to capture more walkable businesses, walkable homes, and those sort of things. So just, probably everybody that's sitting here tonight, probably 90+% of the people that are sitting here tonight drove here. Less than 10% of them walked here. Well, if you're going to get them to walk here to your city hall meetings, you got to give them some rooftops in which to live. But where you place that green space is very important, because that's the ped shed from which you design all of your businesses, all of your houses. You get walkable when you create central communal green space that's walkable. 75% of your average daily living needs, you live in a walkable community, if 75% of your ADLs are walkable, if you can walk to everything you need to. And so that's why it's sitting in the middle, because I would suggest you overlay some ped sheds so you can see how much of this becomes walkable, because the old part of downtown that you're talking about is actually probably not as unwalkable as you think from City Hall. And of course, obviously, you don't want to be walking with tractor trailers there, so you got to get them off that road too. You know.
20
I'm
out
dealing
there.
with that in Monroe still 25 years later. When I moved to Monroe 23 years ago, they were talking about a bypass. And we'll probably get it in 2 more years, so.
Yeah. Okay?
The walkable's a good point. People walk at 200 feet a minute, and main streets are usually 600 to 800 feet. And a lot of times, naive planners will over-plan the main street, and you just can't fill up that much retail. So it's that 600 to 800 feet you want to stick with for a grid. You could do some that are 1,200, but that may have a little bit of different density, and it's usually a one-sided main street. So it's important to kind of concentrate your retail so it can, and we really wanted to help the existing retail, which I think he's the same point he's trying to make. Do we need more retail along there?
Well, and just to follow up, Bill, that the existing historic, I think, are about 600 feet. So the historic Main Street is in line with what we see in historic downtowns in terms of an appropriate Main Street size. So we're complementing that with infill more than we are trying to create a new Main Street along that corridor.
Okay. Have another question, Tim? Oh, you got it next. Okay, fine.
Hi, my name's Brenda Jenkins. I live on C.S. Floyd Road. I'll make some comments and then I'll ask my question and sit down. So I have a stop sign in my yard, and you can sit on my porch at any time of day and see the backed up traffic on C.S. Floyd Road. Now, when they close Main Street because they're filming movies, where does the traffic go? It goes to C.S. Floyd Road. And if you're wanting to make this a pedestrian safe location, adding more people is not going to do that. Adding more traffic. And if you ride up, and when y'all first did your screens up there, you said what you wanted for Loganville. Not the first housing was in there. Y'all did not want that. But here we are with 88 units coming. But if you ride up and down 20 and 81, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of new houses that's been built in the city of Loganville. Is that not enough to fund? Do we need 88 more units to fund what we're trying to do here? That's my question.
Answer that. You probably need more units to fund what you want to do, but that's another story. You probably need more units because of to fund all your dreams. But I think 88 is pretty small amount for this area. And it's the walkability. So yeah, they are building subdivisions, but can any of those people walk to the downtown?
Where are they going to park if they drive? In my yard. People park in my yard when they have parades.
Yeah. So are you on the Main Street here?
I'm on the corner of 10th Floyd
Yeah.
and Fair Street.
Yeah.
1 block from Main Street.
Yeah.
So when you close Main Street, they all come, and then the red light at 20,
Yeah.
that's supposed they put a turning lane in, and they put a turning light, but the light don't turn green. You have to wait till all the traffic's gone before you can turn left onto 20.
Yeah.
It's just a mess.
And when you stop the traffic, does traffic go another way around? When you shut down the traffic, does it have another way around right now?
I think CS Floyd is the way around.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real it's a paradox, actually. The retailers need the traffic. They need for shopping. The residents don't want the traffic. You know, people in a car don't want the traffic.
but traffic helps the economy. So it's strange. But what you really need is alternatives. So you need many alternative paths. So you could shut down a street for a festival and the traffic still moves. We had in downtown Milton, we had a 5-way intersection, all 2-lane roads that wanted to be 4-lane roads, and it was going to destroy the character of that area. So we kept the smaller roads, but then we built a road around the back side of it.
Go ahead.
They ended up locating their city hall there. The traffic problem is not going to go away. When people don't have to get in their car, when they can park once and walk everywhere, that begins to help. That begins to help. When they can live where they can walk to a restaurant, where they live, where they can walk to church, that helps. And so what you want, where you have commercial, where you have churches, you want more residents, so they don't ever have to get in their car and never become part of the traffic.
Bill, can I ask you a question?
I want to follow up after you.
I need to ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're familiar with this, you work with this every day. What would you anticipate the city could sell this piece of property? If we're keeping part of it, obviously, for this part up here, what do you anticipate we're going to sell that for?
I mean, just how many units we approved and multiply it by anywhere from 10 to 20,000.
No, I mean, we're going to sell it to a developer as a piece of property. What are we going to get for that piece of property?
I just told you the formula. I'm not telling you exactly. So if you say you have, say we had 50 units, multiply it by 20,000, you can get $1 million.
Okay, so like we keep being told that we have to allow these apartments to be built here to afford all this. So you just said $1 million. So is $1 million going to pay for everything on this paper?
No, that's what I was saying earlier. You actually need
so-
more housing to make the numbers work.
Yeah, but
And I'm being honest with you, it's what people want, and then there's the financial reality. When we do studies, we like to have, most of our studies are like 5 times the cost of this one, right? And we bring in market analysis people that are like what's his name? Hadow, right? And they'll tell you what the economic situation is, and we overlap that with what the people want. And it's never the economic situation. People are saying the same thing. You got to look for the overlap and maximize as much as you can in the overlap. It's a difficult process. So
well, then let me just ask you a question then. Okay, so then would it not be a financially more responsible decision to not build the apartments, stay in this city hall, give the library a piece of property, let them pay for their library, and then later on, we work on these other things? Because you're not gaining any money
yeah.
to help to build such a small thing.
If you can bring the library downtown and do that as phase 1, that's not a bad idea.
That would be more
That's not a
economically
bad
feasible.
idea. That
It
was
would be
one of our
more
schemes, actually.
responsible to the taxpayers.
Well, I
Because
can't
we're
say
going to have
stuff
to
like
take out
that. I'm
money.
not running for
Well, no.
office.
But we're going to have to take out loans to pay for a new city
Yeah,
hall.
but it's an analysis when you're in the field. Like they were talking about the cost of upkeeping a building this size. I mean, the reason the Braves moved out and built a new thing out in Cobb County is because of the maintenance
Right,
costs. And
but
they
this
could have cut a
building's
deal with the
almost
Fulton
paid
County
for,
Development
so,
Authority.
you know,
that's
everybody
not-
that lives in a
that's not
house
exactly
has.
It's a complicated
That's not
answer. I
exactly
can't
true.
say something that would be
Right, but I mean, that's just maintenance
attractive.
comes with anything. When
And-
when
and the other side
Conley
of
was
it-
here, excuse me, Skip, when Conley was here, and we were looking at building a new city hall, we were told that a new city hall would only last 25 to 30 years. We're sitting at a building that's 60 years old. It has survived very well. It is going to have problems that you're going to have to pay.
I
The
hope
building's
Conley's
almost paid
dead and
for.
buried.
Excuse me.
I hope Conley's dead and buried.
Is-
We're on a different agenda these days.
Skip, can you stop?
No, sir.
You
No,
could make
sir.
this
We don't
whole
need to go
meeting
back and
about
talk about
yourself.
the dead and the buried.
But let her talk. It's always about you.
I think we've let her talk.
No,
Well, at least she's doing one talking.
I had a question for you. How many people per square mile in your research have you found are here? Because you keep going back to the 48 units and the cottages. We have 1,813 people per square mile right now, density. How much more do we need to make this work? Just, we need those quads?
Yeah, but
The
I have friends in the
cottages?
development industry said that, if you have 15,000 cars, they can support a subway. If you have 50,000
No, but
cars.
answer my question though, how much more?
I'm just
density?
saying that's how they look at it. How many, that's the whole market study, guy. That's another study. Be happy to, and Hadow's, I don't know if you asked him that question, but Hadow does that kind of stuff too.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Greg Fowler. I live in King Ridge subdivision in the city of Loganville, and I have two comments. My first comment, I'm going to wait till last, but I walk 8 to 10 miles every day around Loganville, and walking up and down Main Street is nice. The biggest problem walking in Loganville is there's no sidewalks. I would have walked here tonight, but I can't come down 81 because there's no sidewalks. You'll get run over. You can't go down Lee Bird and then hit Bay Creek because you'll get run over. We need sidewalks all around the city. You know, I go anywhere from one side of Loganville to the other. 78's pretty good because it does have a sidewalk pretty much going all the way. But all the other roads, a lot of them just don't have sidewalks, and that's one of our biggest problems here. The downtown area is a real nice area to walk. Even the historic section is really nice to walk. I know a lot of y'all don't like the historic section, but I really do. I like the old buildings. That's just me. That's what I love about Loganville. And the other thing ties into the C section. I know we talked about that, CS Floyd 20. This has been a playground I played on this playground for 50 years, and I'm old enough for that. I really actually have. My kids played on it. Why can't that just stay a park? I mean, it's been here forever. It's. You're
talking about behind the school?
Yeah, behind the school up here. It's been a playground for anybody that grew up in Loganville, went to this school. It's been a playground. And, I see a lot of things I like about y'all's thing. There's a lot of good stuff on Main Street. I like the town green, the green space where you got it. I mean, it is a nice piece of land there. I like to see us get a new library too. So, and I sort of like the lady over here said that, we do have a lot of housing going. We got 350 units going beside the high school. They've got a whole rental community subdivision, 150 houses they put beside me over on 81. We've got 165 townhomes going across from Meridian Park. They got 70-something going behind Ingalls. At the corner of Claude Burr and 81, they got a big subdivision going. We got houses. And like the lady said, if you go up 20 toward Lawrenceville, they're building houses everywhere. There's plenty of people here to support anything that we build here. The problem is nobody wants to be on Main Street because they all want to be on 78 because 78's the corridor where all the traffic is.
Because everybody drives.
Yes,
So
everybody drives.
let me give you, we did a master plan for Hapeville. And what happens in Hapeville, they have 3,000 to 5,000 people that walk. It's a pretty cool little town right next to the airport, but the way it's situated, it's really kind of nice. But all the restaurants close down in the evening, and they have 3,000 to 5,000 people that could walk to them. And the reason they close down in the evening is because during the day, you have 50,000 people from Delta there that fill up those restaurants. They can't afford to keep it up. So, I mean, as many people as all the houses you're getting are just going to help. I know it seems like everybody wants to stop the growth, but those are the people that are going to buy the stuff that's going to keep the stores open, that's going to add square footage to build your Main Street. Yeah.
We got one over here
Hi, I'm
first.
Ted Johns, live on
We
Lee
got
Road.
one over here first? Okay, we got one over here first, and we'll come right back to you over there, okay?
My name is Donnie Clack. I live over here at Fair Street. And I got here late to the meeting, so I'm not sure what we raise the money for, while we have to sell stuff to develop or whatever. So I got a couple of questions. How much money are we trying to raise for the city to do this, or why are we getting rid of good property? Because property is one thing they don't make any more of. Once it gets in the hands of private developers, you outgrow it with the city, you ain't got nowhere to go. Then you become a tenant because you're going to rent from these developers, which is stupid. You're spending taxpayers' money a bad way. But like this weekend, I sat out there on the front porch and watched the fair, several thousand people. I don't know if what kind of money that y'all generated off of that, but depending on what we're trying to raise around here as to what we do, the quality of life, and I understand, I know I've been to a lot of zoning meetings, I've done a lot of developing. Everybody, they don't want the crime, they don't want the traffic, they don't want the drugs, they don't want this. Nobody wants anything except what they got there. So I do understand that. But Loganville is a unique little town. Just because everybody else is doing it don't mean you need to do it too. And you need to really look at what's going on here for the citizens here. And if we're trying to raise money, and there again, have y'all got some idea of what we're raising money for to get rid of this property? What does the city need the money for, and roughly how much?
I don't think it's that issue. I think the issue is whatever goes downtown, and what we would like to have as a viable downtown has got to have people to support it. And to have people to support it, we'd like to have it where they could walk to those stores. That's the reason everybody's out on 78 now. People ask me, well, do you support the places downtown? Well, I certainly would, but most of the time, the things I need aren't downtown to start with. I mean, it's just the way it is. we've got a lot of complicated things that we've got to work through to make it work.
Well, that's the reason I was asking, but if these people here ain't supporting it, 48 more people ain't gonna support it. That ain't gonna be enough to make the numbers work. And I'm not being cocky
I don't
or smart.
disagree with that.
I ain't being cocky or smart, but if y'all want to raise revenue, get one of your cops to sit down here on Fair Street and write speeding tickets. Get another one to sit over here and write stop sign tickets. I'm being dead serious. I have seriously thought about getting a grocery buggy and sitting in my driveway and just pushing it out in front of people with a buggy full of dolls, make them think they done run over a bunch of kids, see if that'll slow them down. But it is pathetic what goes on right here in the city. That stop sign at CS Floyd and Fair Street, I've seen 18-wheelers come through there running 40 and 50 miles an hour. Y'all need to get flashing lights. There's a lot of, y'all get these other 48 people, most likely they ain't gonna be from here, so they ain't gonna think like we do. They're gonna do something stupid. So it's not a good thing. But just, what we're trying to raise, I think it's great to see that fair down here with all them people. I didn't go to it. I don't have grandkids. I don't do that. But I think once you do that, that's gone. I don't know where you're going to set them up and do stuff like that again. But there's ways to raise money other than just bill. Because there's not going to be enough people to live there. And I'm going to say this, and some of you may throw me out, but renters typically don't take nearly as good a good care like homeowners do. And I've lived in trailer parks and everything else, and that's just the way it is. And they'll never have a statistic to say anything different. If they do, I want to see them. All right, thank you.
Yeah, Ted Johns.
Yes, sir.
Ted Johns from up here, Lee Bird Road.
Yes, sir.
I hear you all saying that you want to make downtown more walkable and everything else. Well, 90% of the people that live inside the city of Loganville are outside this walkable area. We're going to have to drive here anyway.
That's true.
So, how are 48 units going to make any difference?
Well, it will make some difference. It may not be enough.
It'll make it walkable for those 48 units, but not for anybody that's here.
But the people in our town, for the most part, for years, have told us they want something downtown that they can be proud of.
Oh, yeah,
I agree
with you.
I don't know how to give them one without some of the other. I just don't know how.
But, I moved to Loganville because I loved the city of Loganville.
Yes, sir.
I liked it the way it was, not the way it's going.
There are those folks that like that, and it's a lot of them around, a lot of us around. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alex Deacon. I live over on Urban Drive. I guess my biggest question is what's the ideal customer or the ideal owner or tenant of these 88, I believe, we all kind of decided on, apartments or townhomes or middle development or whatever we're calling these properties? Because as this younger customer you guys keep talking about, I don't want to live down here. I live outside of the city where I enjoy it. I mean, I'm inside the city, but you can still, I just don't really see any draw for the younger crowd you guys keep talking about. And even if you put these couple restaurants or these couple things, the college students are not going to be living down here because the colleges are over in either Gwinnett or they're in Athens or they're downtown. The college kids are not going to be down here. And how are they going to be affording these $2,500 a month apartments?
Well, I don't know the answer to your question, but I can tell you this. In other cities, young people want to live downtown, and they want to live where they don't have to get in their car and do their thing.
Sure.
And our young people are no different than anybody else.
Restaurants and, I mean,
There's
a bunch of other stuff.
the answer to your question, because we did downtown Smyrna, they said the same thing. Who's going to want to live here? And we had already designed the town center, built the town center, and they're having concerts. Who's going to want to live next to a concert? The development sold faster than any of them, and it was the people that are going to the concert. So not everybody's the same. Some of you are going to want to live in one kind of area, some are going to want to live in another. When I master planned Alpharetta, the community development director said, who's going to want to live above a store? Well, people are paying $3,500 a month to live above the store in Alpharetta. So it's not that there's one solution. There has to be room for everybody. Some people want to be in a walkable downtown. Some people don't. And you have to, and it's a huge population. If it's only 5% of y'all want to live down here, that's enough. And they'll love it, and they'll take care of it, and they'll be champions of it, and they'll come to these meetings and make sure it's taken care of.
You've also talked about the realistically house hackers, because like you were talking about how they were going to be taking in the developments that had the multi-levels and all that. House hackers do not take care of their properties. When you look at that, these people, they're coming in, they're getting these FHA loans. They're not taking care of their properties when you look at that.
That's probably a good code enforcement thing. But you could go to San Bernardino, and you could go to places all around the world where they do that, and they're beautiful pieces of property that they desire. Yes, there are bad people rent. If they own and live there, it's a little easier. It's their investment. Why wouldn't they take care of it? If they're out of town and they own it, might be a different story. But you really want to have local ownership
That's
if
going
you
to be the
can.
majority, I can tell you that.
I take care of my building. It's downtown Atlanta, and I take care of it.
Great, glad for you. I mean, see what happens here.
Okay, I know some people probably are not very excited to see me standing up because some people don't like what I have to say. I've been living in Loganville for over 60 years. My husband and I have been married 60 years, and he's been here 94 years. We love Loganville. We loved it like it was. We loved it when it was small. We loved it 50 years ago when we built, 60 years ago, when we built our home on Teresa Lane, all the way to where the library sits now was nothing but beautiful trees, and it was wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I am not opposed to some of the things that have happened in Loganville. But I think right now, everybody's trying to move too fast. I don't think we're quite ready for all this. One of the most used places that we see in Loganville is the little park where old City Hall used to be. If you go by there anytime, you can just see bunches of little kids up there having a good time. As far as Main Street in Loganville, I think it would be very hard until we have a lot of time to build a place that people could go sit down and really enjoy. I want to tell you, when you talked about making money in Loganville, the best thing that ever happened as far as, we have wonderful schools. Both my kids graduated here, and Miss O'Kelly that gave the library was a very personal friend of mine, and she gave it from her heart. And as well as I can remember, it was promised to her that it would always be a library. And that's what I can remember. I might be wrong. And if we get a new library, that'll be wonderful. But I don't want us to put the taxpayers in having a problem with money. And that can happen. We supported our schools. We supported the churches in Loganville. And we love this town. There's been some wonderful people that have given a lot of heart to this town. And I hope and pray that all of you will really think about what we're doing here. Is this really what we want in our heart? As far as I'm concerned, the city of Loganville, I have a lot of wonderful friends that work for the city. And I love them. And I'm not opposed to anybody that works here. Danny Roberts, I claim as my son. I've known him since he was 3, and I taught him in kindergarten, so you can see what a good student he was. And many of the others here, I dearly love. And I'm not complaining about any of the people that, I know it's my time's up.
Yes, ma'am.
But I could talk another hour about the city of Loganville.
Very good.
Okay, my name's Chuck Vaughn. I'm in Logan Drive, and I want walkable. I walk around all the time. I'll walk across 78 to the restaurants. If there's restaurants here, I'd be very happy to come be a patron of these restaurants. I think the key is walkable. I think I've voted every time we have one of these events for bike pass, walking pass, and all that. I think that, we got to have vision. This is not just let it sit there and be the same way for the next 20 years. I don't want to hear this. I mean, you got to have some vision. I mean, if Melanie even said, let's build the bike pass and the walking pass first. Okay, that brings entrepreneurs. When you have families, as you say, walking around, biking and all that, we got to put the green space in there. And yes, I understand, we heard the same thing before about the apartments. Okay, it's a small thing of apartments that are in there. I know there's traffic, but if we do nothing, traffic's not going to change. It's going to stay exactly the same. I mean, it'll probably get worse, you know, so, okay, we can do something like this. Maybe it's traffic, but it's also, maybe there's a lot more people, a lot more activity, a lot more things to do downtown. I just think it's a pretty good plan here, and I think that, well, I was going to ask one thing. I've always been curious. You know, we own all this property in the city, right? Who pays for that? How do we pay for that? I mean, do we have to pay taxes on that as the government? We don't have, we have special privileges so
If
that
a
we
city
as a
owns it,
city
there's-
don't have to pay county taxes.
There's no tax charge.
Well, that's good. That's good. Because I know we got a lot of property, and I was just wondering what that's costing us, but that's a good thing to hear. All right. I don't have anything else. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir, Ronnie. Let's get you a mic. Coming your way.
Yeah, Ron Moore, I live over in Lake Hodges Landing. Just a quick question for you folks. You've mentioned 200 to 350 apartments. Is that what you feel it's going to take for a developer to come in and build this, to make the investment?
Yeah, but let me clarify
If
that.
not-
I'm not saying that's what you should do.
No, I understand that.
I'm just saying that's what it takes to get a-
Realistically,
Yeah.
to have a developer come in and do the development that's on this plan, how many houses or how many units is it going to take for a developer to come in and make that kind of investment?
Well, there's all kinds of developers, but for an apartment developer, it is in that kind of 150 to 350 range. And that's an apartment developer. You can come in with a residential developer, and he may look at it a totally different way, and he may build none of those for rental. But if he can get 12 units or 8 units, you know, where he can only get 2 units more, he's going to give the city more for the land. And they don't have to be apartments. We're not saying they're apartments.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm looking again realistically how to finance the plan. What sort of development has to happen from a housing perspective, be it
Yeah.
apartments, cottages, whatever, for a developer to come in and make the investment.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if it's not realistic, why are we doing this? I mean, if it's going to take 3 times as many units of some type
But if
for
you-
a developer to make the investment, then
Ron,
why
I
even go
think,
through these
I think
motions?
Bill
If you
is
can
telling you,
convince everybody else in the room to do 250, 350 apartments, you'd be
I think
fine.
he's telling you
I'm not
though,
saying it's the right, I'm just saying,
if you find the right builder, what we've got on this plan and their estimation will work.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
whether
and
we
it's
can
not,
find
it
the right
won't work,
builder
you
or
just
not,
won't
it's
get as
another
much
story.
for land, and it'll be slower. Because I agree with what you said, build the green space, the trails, it'll be slower. But you're building a beautiful town, you don't need to rush it. It's gonna be slower because you're not doing, you do 200, 350 apartments, I could get you, 24 developers that'll want to do that tomorrow.
and I'm not
But
an
you're not,
advocate
but if you
for
don't
that.
do that, it'll be slower.
Yeah,
It'll
I'm
be-
not an advocate
Which
for
is
that,
good.
but I want something that's realistic. I mean, if
Yeah.
if it's a pipe dream, then why go through the motions?
It's a pipe dream for an apartment developer, but I've heard that you all don't want an apartment developer. And a lot of people are making money in the apartment world right now, so there's a lot of pressure. But again, I'm not in it for the money. We're not in it for the money. We don't develop. I just know what the numbers are.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes.
Oh, we gotta get your mic. It's on its way.
Thank you. My name is Brittany Jordan. I live across the street on Lawrenceville Road. Back in January, you guys had discussed the possibility of turning this place into lofts. Was there ever any discussion about that from the stakeholders? And if so, what did they say?
Do you remember?
Yeah,
It's a good
no,
question.
I think I said it. Yeah, it was an alternative. We actually did not dig into that as part of our discussions with the stakeholders. I don't have an answer beyond that for you. It's definitely still a possibility. We just didn't, and it would take, like we talked about with understanding the root of this building, it would take a deeper dive into what's feasible. within this building.
I could give you a case study. I guess I've been around so too long, but I did at downtown College Park. They had a historic school built in 1929, and they had water damage and some ugly modern additions. And there, at the time, the head of economic development was into historic preservation, so he hired us to see what can we do with this school and save it. And we said, well, you should rip off the modern stuff that's destroying it, put a tarp over it so it starts raining, and then look for our use. And we were looking at for an art center and different things, but then another friend of mine, like a couple years later, came and took that plan, and he built apartments and townhomes and kept that building and made it part of the apartment development. And it was 55-plus seniors that used that old school, and the school was part of it. There was actually some loss in the classrooms. This is not a charming school. I hate to say that, but that was a very charming school and a piece of history you wouldn't want to lose. But, you know, somebody said this is built strong. We don't build them like this anymore. I am building a city hall with terrazzo and granite and stuff like that, and it costs, you know, it's costing $600 a square foot. It's expensive. I'm not saying that's what this would cost, but we don't build them like this anymore. But then you do probably have asbestos. You probably have it would take all kinds of analysis to see if this makes financial sense. It's not somebody can give you a quick answer to.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think my question, well, my name's Joy Pickanew. I'm on the property across the street, 4290 Lawrenceville Road. I think my question is more for the councils. If there was more parking accessible to the city, these plans, would a lot of these, I think this concept, would it change? You know, I mean, would you still need the apartments or the townhomes and that you're saying that you need to support the funding?
The business and the retail.
Right. If you had more parking.
It's a parking question. If you had more parking, then maybe we don't need all these buildings.
Right.
There's a lot of underutilized asphalt, so if you just drive down any of these strips and you look at how much is just asphalt out there. So and it's really bad zoning that we've done for about 80 years now. Ever since the car was invented, we started doing zoning that you all had to provide your own parking spaces on every unit. And what we end up is degrading our environment, making less and walkable communities because everybody has to provide their parking. So we realized in the suburbs we have too much asphalt for the most part. And so when we design it, there is enough parking. She did the math, but it's not in a big surface parking lot, which really doesn't attract a lot of people. So and there's not a dollar value. I mean, people think parking should be free. So if you provide more parking, they're not going to pay you more money, and it's going to sit empty. You may fill it up during the festivals, but I'd rather you get like a cart train, like a go-kart train, and park somewhere else and roll them in, you know, during the festival for that one time where you have empty asphalt all over the place. That's just my opinion based on 30 years of research and looking at the data.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank everybody that has worked on this project. It's the best thing we have been presented with so far. And I'd like to thank all the city council and everybody else that works hard. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input, and I guess all of us realize if it was easy, we'd already done it. It's not easy. One of the things when I saw the list of towns that the stakeholders had mentioned, and I think about this quite often, you look at Madison, you look at Monroe, you look at Winder, you look at those cities, Lawrenceville around us, they were all county seats back in the day, and they have an infrastructure that we just don't have. We're going to have to build what we build. Now, that gives us the opportunity to build it the way we as a group want it, but still, it costs a lot of money to put in buildings and infrastructure. It really does.
Skip, can I answer or ask one more question?
Sure, meet it.
I heard a lot of people ask about why we're doing it for the money. I don't believe we're doing any of it really for the money. It's to make the downtown viable. So we need to have a lot of this here to make these restaurants that we've all been asking for, steakhouses, stuff like that. We have to make it a viable plan overall. So it's not, because, I've been on economic development for a while now, and I'm trying to get restaurants to come downtown. And it is a very, very hard thing to do, because they pull charts, their half-mile radius, and they know where we spend our money. It's the same thing, people don't want chicken in Mexican restaurants. Well, then don't eat there, because you vote with your wallets on a lot of stuff like that. And a lot of this goes down with viability, with the walkability. So it's not really that we're looking to make money on it. I think it's more so to make it viable so it lasts the test of time, not for the here and now, but 30, 40, 50 years down the road. So I don't really think it's the money that we're going after when it comes to any of this.
And too, to add to that, a lot of people in our town say, I wish there was more for us to do, so we didn't have to go to other towns where we had a restaurant with a band and those kinds of things, and we don't have it today. So, sure, you could wait for the mic.
The top two cities that y'all mentioned that everybody would like to see is Covington and Monroe, and neither one of those have apartments in the middle of them, or any rentals.
Monroe does.
They have people that live around them, just like I live around here, but they're not. They don't have apartments rented or cottages or townhouses in the middle of Main Street.
Well, I guess, Paul, you're going to be the best answer to this.
They have living above retail.
I can share with you, Monroe has a lot of lofts over downtown,
retail.
and they're all rented out.
So like where Scoops is and all that, they have lofts?
Right next to Scoops, going all the way down. It's a Wayfair hotel now, but it's all rented.
But not down Main Street?
It is down off Broad Street. All
Where
that.
Scoops and...
Yep. That's all above. That's all.
Okay. My bad.
That's okay.
I want to thank y'all a lot for coming. Y'all have done a great job so far, and I'm really looking forward to working with y'all in the future. I know we have a lot more to discuss, and just thank y'all for working with us and coming here and being a part of this. We really appreciate y'all. So thank y'all so much. I think.
Okay, we got 30 seconds for another question, so take you 3 minutes. That's fine. Go ahead.
No, my name's Dan Hodges, and I don't live here, but my sisters and I own 4 houses downtown.
Yes,
I'm a dentist in Monroe. Paul knows who I am. And you're wanting to be Monroe. There are apartments downtown Monroe. You just don't see them. They are everywhere. But if you haven't been to downtown Monroe, this is what everybody wants. Y'all want downtown Monroe, but you, like Mr. Mayor said, you've got to build the infrastructure. It was the county seat. The county courthouse is right downtown. Everybody knows what it looks like. The courthouse that's not a functioning courthouse, but it's historic. But you've got to build stuff downtown. And you go to Monroe, you can park and you can walk all downtown Monroe, and you can walk from one end to the next in 4 minutes. And you got on the side streets, the back streets, the front street, all the buildings are full. It's walkable. Golf carts are downtown. They can't get on the main road, but that's what you want. And you're not going to get that down here unless you do something like this plan. That's what's going to happen. It really is if you do that. And downtown Monroe is nice, but there are apartments downtown Monroe. You just don't see them. They are everywhere, and people drive downtown Monroe. They're starting to charge for parking downtown Monroe now. You can walk, people walk, and they can go from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant to shop to shop to shop, and it's fun. It is fun, and that's what you're trying to get here, but you've got to build the infrastructure to do it.
Got to have it.
And that's what you got to do.
Okay, we got one more question in the back, and thank you for that. One last question.
I won't take a lot of time. My name's Donna, and I live off of Sharon Church. I've been a business owner in Loganville on Main Street for almost 7 years now, and in 7 years, I've seen lots of change. One thing that has gotten worse is the traffic on Main Street. It can take me 40 minutes sometimes to get to the gym, leaving from Sharon Church to get up 20 in the afternoons. which is unacceptable to me. Okay, that's why I don't work in town anymore. But through the Apple TV filming and through the last several years or whatever with all the traffic, but with all this, I'm seeing construction and things are going through my head as a business owner. And is there any, it's easy to say, okay, we're shutting down Main Street for 7 days. Oh, we're shutting down the 2 roads in the back. Oh, there's no place to park. When you're trying to run a business and your business gets affected financially by that, it's kind of sad. And it really kind of sucks. And my question is the city going to help the businesses that are currently on Main Street that have been there and supporting the city through the last years? Are they going to give us any support when the financials go down because people can't get to us? That's just something I think about. And I hope somebody else cares enough to think about that, because through the last 2 years, there hasn't been a lot of care in my eyes when the roads get shut down and customers can't get to us when they have 10 minutes.
That's valid. We appreciate the comment. I can tell you this, though, and I think the city does the best they know how to do the things that we try to get done for the citizens, like the car shows and the Autumn Fest, and bring people downtown. But I don't believe that we're going to be in the business of supporting retailers because cars can't get there. And there's one other thing I just wanted to mention, then we're going to wrap it up, please. I wanted to war, and I think Bill will agree with this, with those flashing yellow lights. I don't understand them, but I can tell you what they tell us. They tell us if they go to a green light, it's going to slow down traffic coming from another direction more than we're going to fix by having that green light. A lot more. So is that a fair statement? In many cases? I mean, it's just the way it is. I fought for the deal down at Main Street, turning left on 78, had them all out there walking the street. They gave me a little more storage lane, and I got mad at them. I said, and we're not here to store cars, by God, we're here to move them. Well, if they gave us a green light so we could turn left on 78, that car's coming from Conyers, we would back them up even further. So they're the experts. I don't know. I don't like it, but I don't know. But anyway, we'd like to thank the stakeholders who put their time and help the Sizemore Group put this thing together. We really appreciate it. We know there's a lot of differences of opinion. We know nobody's plan is going to be exactly like the one that's going to happen. We know that. But we're going to do the best we can to hopefully put something together. We'll just have to wait and see. Time will tell. And with that said, thank you guys for being here tonight. I know we got one input deal that we're going to have going, and you're going to give us back another rendition of what we're looking at. And with that, I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, it's always hard to get that motion to adjourn. That's the hardest one. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Very good. Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all.